Hey friends, David Tensen here. Welcome. I wanted to do a live broadcast. It has been a while since I've done one on the LeaderHeart page. So if you are tuning in, feel free to share this if you like. I'm going to be talking about the unspoken dynamics of church family styles. And after I've just shared a few thoughts here, if you want to know more, you can always contact us. There is a fantastic book that's been out and revised a few times by a number of authors called Unlocking Your Family Patterns. Unlocking Your Family Patterns, and it's available at bookstores, and I think it's available on Kindle as well. But I wanted to share with you some thoughts around church family dynamics, which is a bit of a strange topic, but if you're watching this, I'm going to guess that at some point in time, and perhaps even currently, you're part of some kind of church family. And what is always interesting and often unseen and I guess unexamined is that you've entered into a whole new family. New believers enter into new families. Now, I've been a Christian for over 20 years now, and have been part of 4 different church families over that time. And even while I was there were some changes internally, and some of you know what it's like if there's a change of leadership or things like that. And that always changes the dynamics. But I guess what I want to talk about here is something that comes up time and time again, and I find absolutely fascinating. So I'm just going to table it with you for you to think about, because church relationships have particular styles. Now, I will often ask somebody if they've gone through a journey feeling that the Lord has led them to a particular place and things haven't worked out well, and then they've become disenfranchised. I'll often ask them a question: did you feel led to go there, or did you feel drawn to that place? Now, there's nothing wrong with either feeling led or feeling drawn, but it's going to be important for us to know that there is a difference between the Lord really speaking to you and leading you to go somewhere and you being drawn. And you know what? In most cases, you can't tell, because you feel a drawing towards something, and you feel that that's the leading of the Lord, and it may well be. So I'm not going to be a judge of that, but just keep in mind, sometimes we're drawn to particular church families and styles, and then it makes it easier for us to hear the word of the Lord about that yeah, this is comfortable to me, this really suits me, this is where I'm after. And what most of us don't realize is that drawing and that thing that becomes attractive to us and we find is comfortable for us, or we find security in that kind of church relationship, is often that security is often found because we find security in what we find predictable, even if what we find predictable is really unhealthy. So if you grew up in a dysfunctional home to any degree, and this might be extreme dysfunction of major abuse and all sorts of stuff, absolutely immature and incapable parents, to anywhere that's scaled back to one parent's an alcoholic, the other one's the enabler, whatever their case is scale it back to just the dysfunction of even what we might call functional homes that have got it together. There's no such thing as a fully functional home. So we need to just smash that myth out of the water and realize that there are dysfunctions, patterns that we grow up with, and we became familiar with particular things, but if we can predict it, we can stay secure, if you know what I mean. Now, how does this translate across to church family roles here? And this is going to be a really interesting thing. Again, if you're joining us here, feel free to share this. I'm going to share this on my page here now. But let's have a look at the difference between your family of origin and where you found yourself now in a church. And maybe as I talk now, you'll be able to see some dynamics in your own life. Maybe you'll see it in the lives of those that you know and that you love. Maybe this explains why you keep finding yourself in particular church families and church styles and keep hitting the same roadblock. I have got good news for you, and the good news is that can change, because you can change. Because chances are, friends, and I say this with all humility and honesty, that the problem is never one-sided. It's always two-sided. It's us and them, because none of us sin alone. We're all connected, and you need somebody to sin against, and you need somebody to sin against you. Point being, it is always symbiotic. Okay, we are intimately connected through the blood of Christ, through what Christ has done and did before the foundations of the world, and there's no separating from that. That's the good news, that we're connected. So what does it look like? Claudia Black is a recovery specialist, and I talk a bit about her in this book. If you just joined us, it's called Unlocking Your Family Patterns. Great book, and I'm just sharing a couple of thoughts from that. And we teach a little bit of this as I teach the Out of the Tombs, Healing from Church Wounds series as well. So here we go. Let me give you 4 different personality types. Now these would translate to roles that we took on in a family. Our family of origin growing up, or maybe a previous church family, some kind of group where you were able to take on a role in a larger church family, and how that then translates into what it's like for you at your church. And you may see this in yourself, your partner, or if you're a pastor or a leader watching it, you may be able to see these patterns in some of your congregation, and be able to move ahead and step ahead and make some arrangements to keep things healthy and running. And the first is the overly responsible person. That's the first role. This person is happy, they're serving, they always fill the gap. It's the person everyone said, if everybody was like John, if everyone was like Elizabeth, we would, this church would be an amazing place. Thank you for serving it. And that will be said on occasion of them, but not always to them. And if it's a small church, that often ends up being the pastor's wife that ends up filling the gap of all the little things, from the morning tea to the cleaning to maybe the bookwork to the organising of the flowers to, for somebody in hospital, to just all the hundreds of little things that have to happen in a church family, like they do at home. The dishes don't get done themselves. The floor does need to be cleaned. Somebody does need to shop, pay the bill, call the electrician, all that. There has to be somebody. And this is the overly responsible person. The challenge is, and the problem is, they're only often appreciated or noticed when they've gone. And then you realize you've got a big gap. And they will often go either, they just left because they had enough. Sometimes they can leave well, but in most cases, died, burnt out, or something's happened because they've gone largely unnoticed and largely overworked. And part of the reason is their own fault, because as growing up, they were the noble martyr. They're the ones that did everything. They were the ones that did all that kind of work. So that's the overly responsible person. The next person is what Claudia Black calls the acting out person. And for me, if I look at dysfunctional family models and roles, I think this is sort of the scapegoat person. So the last one was the noble martyr. This is the scapegoat. This is the person that acts out. And in a funny way, this is the person that is the pain to everybody. This is the person that acts out all the pain that the church family's going through. They end up just somehow collecting it and then expressing it. And if you can keep an eye on these people, it's actually sometimes a good indicator at where you're at. The scapegoat will be the one who goes and points out, or the person that's scapegoated, if you understand dysfunctional roles. The person that's scapegoated pointed out what was wrong here, and everyone's like, no, you're not true. It's like, we're right, things are not good. No. And then a false unity is created as we work against that person, or we complain against that person, or we're not agreeing with that person. But deep, many of you know that person is right. You just don't know how to address it, fix it. So instead of dealing with the issue, you deal with the person, and that's the scapegoat. Some of you, the light bulbs are coming on. You're like, that was me in the family. I often spoke up and said, this isn't right, that's not right, that's not right. And the whole family was against me because they prefer to be silenced and go on the status quo. And you'll often find that person in church families, and it takes strong, mature leaders to work with them. The amazing thing is, once the scapegoat finds healing, they may not speak out as much, or they may not attract as much scapegoating, but they still have a voice. And if the scapegoat finds healing too, some people will quite be uncomfortable with it. And the unfortunate thing is often they're ousted or discouraged, or, well, that's, this is just the way John was, and here you are again, and that year of inner healing and that program you did, and when you went off to Bethel or Hillsong or wherever college, hasn't really helped you, still the same. And unfortunately they find themselves discouraged because dysfunctional churches and families need the scapegoats the same way they need the person who does all the work. Next role here, and if you do have any questions, let me know and I'll try and answer them towards the end. The next role are the mascots or the clowns, and this is that kid in your family who is like the funny one. He gets the attention. They don't necessarily work hard, and this happens in church life too. You may know that there are some people within that church family that are the funny ones, the likable ones, and part of their role is to make everyone feel welcomed and just help gloss over the dysfunction here, and they get the attention while the person who's the noble martyr, the overly responsible one's doing all the work. And a lot of conflict often happens between them because it's a bit of a Mary Martha syndrome, except somebody's not sitting at the feet of Jesus. They're sitting in a place of entertainment to keep they know deep down things are not right, and the best thing I've ever learnt to do is to make fun of it. So you may know that person in the meeting, in the board meeting or a serious meeting, where it's getting down to a place where it might feel a bit uncomfortable, and then they crack a joke and lighten it up and change the subject, and you're like, you've absolutely avoided any conflict. But not all conflict isn't healthy. Sometimes the conflict and the issues need to be broached, but this person is then often protected by the leaders because, come on, give them a go, don't worry about them, they're often protected because they help cover up the crap and keep the status quo. Final thing, and we're talking about church family roles and how our family of origin translate often to where we find ourselves in church families. The final role is that adjusting member, and some people call this the distant child or the invisible child. And in a church situation, this is the person that will be there sometimes, won't be there another time because there's another speaker in town, and they hop around. And for me, I hear pastors and leaders, and I agree with them, not 100% because of something, but because of what I'm about to say. But to a large degree, I agree. To be in a good, healthy family and to grow in your faith, allowing yourself to come under safe authority and safe leadership and loving authority and leadership, it's going to be important for your personal growth. Okay, so but there are those that grew up in families where it wasn't safe for them to be around, and they become that distant child, the invisible child, the child that isn't a problem because they're not around. They're either in their room or they're at their friend's house, or they've found something to do, and they're just not around, and they just adjust to the ebbs and the flows of family life growing up. When it's not comfortable and not good for them and doesn't suit them, there's enough dysfunction in the home that they can go missing and nobody asks, because at least there's peace and we're not being hassled. And that person can often become the adjusting member that hops and jumps between different churches and will go to all the different conferences, but never finds themselves necessarily, growing and stuck. And that can be a real frustration to pastors and leaders. And if there are some pastors and leaders watching, let me just encourage you that be aware of this, that some people, because of the way that they've grown up, even if things start really being good and turning around, and they start feeling comfortable and they start settling in and people want to befriend them, that's too much for them to handle because of all the deep pain and trauma that has come through their family of origin. And they will leave, and it might break your heart because they may be lovely people, but they'll find themselves having to adjust somewhere else because they're not comfortable. I find it interesting as churches and leaders go through stages of healing. Maybe new pastors come on and there were dysfunctional pastors and things that there, and some new pastors come on and healing comes. It's strange how some church family members will leave, and the reason is because, as I said at the start, that security comes through predictability. They will often find themselves, at least with the pastors and the leaders and the bosses and the managers and the campus leaders we had before who were tyrants and whatever else, however they want to judge them in that situation or assess it. At least they were predictable, and there was security in that predictability because they were much like mum or dad was. They were distant. They were angry. They would turn up just on Sundays. You wouldn't hear from them at all. They were. You just didn't know what you were going to get. Were you going to get a nice pastor and an angry pastor? Were you going to get a soft sermon or a loud sermon? Were they going to call, somebody an idiot over the lunch break? Whatever that is, even if that seems negative and dysfunctional, friends, if it's predictable, people find security in it. Then comes the good, safe shepherds into that house, and they leave. And you're thinking, why? Healing's coming. It's been great. People don't get it. Why, when the tyrant left and we came, you left a year later? The reason may well be is because they're just so used to the dysfunctional system of the old home, and this new healthy family isn't predictable enough for them. It's just too much of an adjustment, so they find themselves somewhere else. It's unfortunately very similar to partners of abusive victim. If a lady's been a part of a domestic violent home or marriage, once that's left, they often find themselves in the same pattern again and again because of what they're drawn to, because of all the other dynamics to do that, and because a nice, safe, loving husband is maybe too much of a jump and they can't adjust that. So I know it's a lengthy position, but I think that's going to encourage some pastors and leaders out there, because some people leave, even if they leave because you bring safety and you bring healing, and it's too foreign for them. You bring unconditional love and grace, and that's too much of a jump for them. And it's a shame, but it's why we Nat and I and people we work with are just passionate about having healthy hearts and healthy churches, and especially healthy leaders that create healthy cultures within churches and Christian organizations and so on. So they're the roles. Thank you everybody who's been tuning in. I have seen there have been some questions here, so let me see if I can actually do that. I'll find this, see if I can find some questions. Somebody asked, can you have more than one role? You can actually have more than one role. So the 4 roles were the overly responsible martyr, the acting out scapegoat person, the mascot or the clown, and the adjusting member. So you could jump between a couple of roles there, and you may have learnt those roles growing up. You may have been in a small family, or you've really had to adjust rapidly because of rapid changes. Mixed families, of course, someone leaves, someone else comes in, and you have to take a different role. Within the 18, 20 years most of us spend at home, we may have to jump between roles, and we learn to do that to keep the peace at home and to stay safe and find things predictable. So that's a really good question. You could fluctuate and move between some of those roles. Somebody said Stockholm Syndrome, perhaps. Absolutely. I have seen and heard stories and walked with people who are lovely, balanced, smart, hardworking, good. They tick all the good Christian boxes. They not only tick that, but they tick good, balanced people, citizen boxes, and they end up under absolute abusive, unacceptable, spiritually abusive church leadership models, and they stay there. And they're suffering for it. And I think it is in part, imagine a young girl who grew up in a home where dad never said, I loved you. He was an alcoholic. He was, or had some other, addiction. His love was very sporadic. There was nothing that was predictable about dad. But because you're that little girl or boy who loves and idolizes their dad, you will always make excuses. Dad's at the pub, but you go, maybe he's working hard. Maybe he's saving up for that pony he's promised me. Maybe, and we make excuses for them because the pain is too much. And then we tend to, and Stockholm Syndrome is when you tend to sympathize and empathize with your abuser. And so yeah, you can do that. That same pattern, if unhealed, will translate into a church family model, and people will sit and endure extreme abuse for no other reason as they feel sorry and they hope that this person will change, and they think ultimately deep down that person is good. And friends, ultimately deep down, because of who they are in God, they are good, but they have a huge journey ahead of them, and abusers are only abusers if they have people to abuse, basically. And so I suggest you just remove yourself. You do the heart journey of having a good look, getting godly counsel, and genuinely pray about removing yourself somehow from that situation. And the longer you leave that, the harder it'll be. So I just suggest people make those adjustments quickly and go, and also have a plan to settle themselves in and under a place of refuge and safety, and somewhere where they can grow and just be loved on and recovered by people that have a good reputation, and that are going to be good and strong, unconditionally loving leaders that are for you and don't carry the dysfunction of an abuser. So yeah, that's what Stockholm Syndrome is. It's you can look it up. It's an interesting psychological phenomena. I feel like I'm the overly responsible one and the clown. Somebody wrote, yeah, you can jump between those models. That happens as well. So if there's no more questions, I'll sign off from there, because it's been a lengthy broadcast, but I do hope that's of help to some of you. Please feel free to like and share this. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. And if you do have any questions, I might be able to answer them one morning in the next couple of weeks between some major travel dates that I have, and we can work forward from there. We've got stacks of information on just living better, being emotionally healthy and better, and walking in the full stature of your identity in Christ. A whole stack of resources, everything available at www.davidtensen.com. The link is in the Facebook bio here, and in the LeaderHeart shop button, I think you can press. And we've got a stack there. Feel free to ask us any questions. And God bless you. May his face shine upon you, be gracious to you, lift up his countenance upon you, give you incredible peace and shalom today. Peace.